Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of Hey Wow Cool Cameraman. As you may remember from our last two episodes, we looked at a couple of cameras from the 1950s through the 1980s. The first one we looked at was the very cool Japanese rocket camera, basically a box camera, and it was a very simple camera like this. You can look at episode 1 to find out more about that. In episode 2, we talked about the twin lens reflex camera. One type in particular, the Pearl River camera, not from Pearl River, New York, but from Pearl River, China. And if you'd like to see more about that one or see some photos I took with it, you can look at episode 2. So we looked at cameras from the 1950s and all the way up through the 80s. And today we're looking at a camera that is both extremely modern and based on extremely ancient technologies. The camera we're going to look at today is called the Pinhole printed camera, and it uses a technology that was used as far back as the 17th century. It's believed to have been used by painters like Vermeer, and that technology was called the camera obscura, which basically translates, I believe, to the dark chamber or the dark room. This is a pinhole camera called the obscura, and it is very much like the original technique that was used in the camera obscura by the painters. When these painters used the camera obscura, it was literally a chamber or a room, so it was the size of a room. It was a room that was darkened completely and had one very small hole on one side of it. So if you imagine this as a room, on one side we would have a hole, and on the other side we would see the projected image of what was outside of the room. So you could actually still do that today if you got a room completely darkened, made a very small hole on one side of it. Whatever was opposite that hole would be projected onto the back wall. So Vermeer is thought to have done that because around the time Vermeer was painting, painters moved from a sort of stylized idea of perspective, like you might see in earlier paintings where it's almost a distorted theatrical perspective, to a scientific perspective. Okay, so that's the old part of the technology. The new part of the technology is 3D printing. So my Pinhole printed camera, which is the name brand of the camera, is exactly that. It is a pinhole camera that was printed on a 3D printer, and you can probably get a sense right here of the many layers of material that were used to print this camera. It looks sort of like a toy camera, but it is actually a functioning camera, and I'm going to show you some pictures I took with it later. It's got only two moving parts, and like the camera obscura itself, there's a hole on one end, an empty chamber in the middle, and the image opposite the hole would be projected onto the back. In this case, we put film at the back. Some of these pinhole cameras don't use film, they just use paper. This camera, you simply put the photographic paper at the back, close it in a dark room, bring it out into the light, open the shutter, and there's an extremely small aperture there, so the light would get in. And in this camera we have, this is our shutter, which we open and close like that, and you'll see a metal plate here that has a very small pinhole in it. Okay, so one thing to think about with the pinhole camera, the hole in the camera is literally made with something the size of a pin. Typically a camera that you would use at home would have an aperture anywhere from as big as the tip of your finger to maybe the size of a large nail. Because the hole is so small in the pinhole camera, we need to spend a lot of time getting light in. When I say a lot of time, on a cloudy day, you may need to leave the shutter of the pinhole camera open for 10 minutes. What's interesting about that is anything that moves across the front of the camera while it's open for 10 minutes will not even be seen. I'm going to look for a picture that was one of the earliest pictures taken with a camera in France, and it's taken in broad daylight in Paris, but it looks like there's no one on the street except for 2 people. That's because those 2 people were in the process of doing a shoe shine, so they didn't move for 10 minutes. Okay, so this is the Pinhole camera. This one actually takes film. It takes 120 film, which shoots square shots. It can be advanced with the advanced knob, and once you're ready, you have to have it on a tripod so it doesn't move. Depending on the light, you would sort of calculate it. There are charts online to do this. You would open this shutter and leave it open, aiming at what you were looking at for up to a few minutes or longer. Some Pinhole photographs, the shutter is left open for hours. I do have a few photos here, and I'm going to show you better reproductions of these online, because I can't tell if you can see this well or not. But this is a shot I took with this camera. This was taken in Piermont, New York. And as you may notice, I used black and white film. You can actually use color. But this shot to me looks more like a drawing by somebody like Whistler or Seurat's charcoal drawings than it looks like a photograph, but that's something I really love about it. The silhouetting is actually something I did myself. You may remember Pinhole cameras from high school that were made in an oatmeal box, and those actually did have a silhouette occurring naturally. This one I silhouetted myself, but that is the shot with the camera. Here's another shot I took. This one didn't come out quite as well, but also in Piermont. Again, I silhouetted that, but that is with this camera. So today's camera was the Pinhole Printed, which is the name of the company, camera. A very simple plastic camera. Interestingly, you can either buy this camera and have it sent to you, or simply pay to have the program sent to you, and then you can download it to your printer, so you could print it at home if you wanted. Okay, that's episode 3 of Hey Wow Cool Cameraman. Next week we're going to be looking at a giant size 4x5 camera that was used by the photographer, or one like it was used by the photographer Ouija. And thanks again for being here. Hope to see you next time.